Hello, this is Dr. Mohamed Noor, and you're listening to the Humanist Trek podcast.
Perhaps I could use this as an excuse to go to those far-off planets with little polka-dotted people if necessary, and be able to talk about love, war, nature, God, sex, all those things that go to make up the excitement of the human condition.
I'm Captain James Kirk.
Spock.
Your move, Captain.
Jim Kirk of the Enterprise.
What's going on?
I'm James Kirk. These people are my friends and my shipmates. Leave my crew alone.
Out of the question.
How about that?
James Kirk.
It fits like a glove, Captain.
Oh, the bonehead ideas.
Gentlemen, I'm Captain James Kirk. Get out of my chair. Get out of it now.
My greetings and felicitations, Captain. So good of you and your officers to, drop in. Absolutely smashing.
Jolan True, friends, and welcome to Humanist Trek. It's a Star Trek podcast about the humanism in Star Trek. I'm Sarah Ray.
And I'm Allie Ashmead.
And today it's also a Star Trek podcast about the evolutionary biology of Star Trek.
Yay, evolutionary biology.
Joining us this week, Dr. Mohamed Noor, the Biotrekkie. Welcome.
Hello.
Thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure. Thank you for having me on your podcast. I'm excited to chat with y'all.
Dr. Noor is a professor of biology and the interim vice provost for academic affairs at Duke University. He is the author of Live Long and Evolve: What Star Trek Can Teach Us About Evolution, Genetics, and Life on Other Worlds, and regularly gives classes and talks using science fiction to teach scientific principles, and now serves as an occasional scientific consultant for the Star Trek industrial complex, which is fucking insane. Where were you in 1966? They needed you.
Oh, yeah, I was not yet born, so I didn't have much to do then.
One quick programming note before we get going. Pop quiz. Where can you meet Todd Stashwick, Denise Crosby, J.G. Hertzler, and me and Allie at Galacticon 2023, November 24th through the 26th at the Denver Marriott Tech Center. We will be there. We may even be giving a panel, which will be real interesting. And I know Allie's super nervous about that idea.
Yeah.
all of y'all together?
Well, not all of us together. We will not be doing it with Todd Stashwick.
No.
That would be great.
But they will be there, and I hope to meet them.
Yeah.
Go to galacticondenver.com to learn more. Let's kick things off. Talk just a little bit about your love of Trek. Like, what was your introduction to the franchise as a fan?
Sure. So I was born in the early 70s, and the first time I saw a Star Trek episode was probably when I was about 8 or something like that. I don't remember the exact age. But I remember the episode, and it was a rerun at the time of the original series episode for The World is Hollow and I've Touched the Sky. And I was drawn in right after that. Like, that first episode, I was in. Like, this is fascinating. There's these explorers, and they're going to this world, and the people don't even understand what their world is. And there's all sorts of understanding and plot around it. So I came back, and so obviously before cable and stuff like that was common, I tried to find Star Trek on my local station. I found it. Watched reruns and watched the movies as they came out. So, the first movie, Wrath of Khan, all those things that basically been watching every series since that time. So literally as it aired, except for obviously the original series, I watched every other series as it aired.
Yeah.
And animated.
We've talked a bit before. Next Gen was kind of my point of entry. I grew up, and I don't remember the origin story. This is what sucks about ADHD brain is like, I would love to go remember the moment that I, was flipping through the channels like you did back then, and stumbled across this show and was like, what's this? I would love to have remembered that moment, but it's gone.
Maybe a friend brought you in too.
Yeah, right.
For me, it's very much like you, Dr. Noor. My mother introduced me to the original series because, there was a black woman on it and she was watching it, and I'm stuck in front of the TV. I'm 5 years old. So we were watching reruns, and that's how I ended up loving Star Trek.
That's awesome. I love that.
So I've kind of stalked your YouTube channel a little bit, and I know you were on the Shuttle Pod podcast a few months ago, and then you were also on the Star Trek The Cruise this year. I was too. It was my first cruise. I love your enthusiasm for science and how you talk about it, and it's infectious. You make it fun, but you also make it accessible, and that's what I love I love about you, and I love about science. So thank you for that. So
that's like the best compliment you can
Aw.
possibly give to an educator. So thank you very much for that. That's really wonderful.
Because nobody wants to hear a professor drone on about science, but you're excited about it, which makes us excited about it.
Can I interject a classic Sarah science story?
Yeah.
This is a legendary Sarah science story. In 7th grade, we were using the very poorly photocopied pictures of cells. And you know where I'm going. And we had to label the parts of the cell and all of this shit. And I remember vividly in 7th grade writing a biology test. I hate science. And I spelled science wrong. And I got points off for spelling. But that's exactly it, right? It was dry. It was boring. It was rote memorization, and that's what I love about guys like you. And there are other science communicators who really like bring an enthusiasm to science. And now, as an adult, like I've found a new love for science.
Yes.
I love what y'all was saying. I completely agree. That's exactly the goal for all these talks and the videos and things like that. I mean, because so many people out there just already start off loving science, and maybe they stick with it. Maybe they're like, avid bird watcher, insect collector, something like that. Maybe they stick with it. Sometimes what happens is, especially the way a lot of science has traditionally been taught, I think there's a trend against that now. The way it's been taught originally is just memorize all these terms, memorize all the parts of the cell, memorize all the, it's like, that's not science. That's just memorizing a bunch of stuff. It'd be like,
exactly.
Yeah, it'd be like learning a foreign language without actually doing sentence construction.
Yeah. Everyone in America can tell you that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell, but none of us know what that even means.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And we need more scientists. So I'm hoping that, educators like you are making them interested in it. Where did your love of science come from? Like, what got you into it?
Yeah, so both my parents were in STEM. They both were engineers. So I grew up with a lot of science around me. On sort of the space front, I know. So my father worked at NASA, though not for NASA. He was an aerospace engineer, but he was physically located at NASA. And I remember, for example, he brought home this book in the late 70s. I still have it actually in my old bedroom there where they live. It's called On Mars. And it's all these pictures from like the Viking space missions. And it's actual like pictures from, another planet. Which, now I know that's getting a little normal.
But late 70s, it was.
Late 70s, it was crazy. Like, that is actually on another planet. I remember being fascinated by that. I also did like to go out and catch bugs and things like that. So I think I always kind of like science. And what's nice too about Star Trek is the people who tend to like Star Trek tend to also like science. So the two are very self-reinforcing, that when you find other science people, they tend to like Star Trek, but you find other Star Trek people, they tend to like science, and you can sort of rip off each other and build and feel very accepted in both fronts together. So I love that aspect to it too.
Well, and that leads to the next logical question, of course, which is, how did your love of Trek and your love of science come together? Is this a freak transporter accident like Tuvix or?
Yeah, I went to my first convention in 2014. I'd never been to one before. My daughter actually suggested going because she was a big Doctor Who fan at the time, and she said, "Look, Patrick Stewart's going to be there." So I was like, I'm all in. Patrick Stewart's going to be there.
Doctor Who?
Yeah, exactly. This was Dragon Con in Atlanta in 2014.
Yeah.
Oh my God, I think I was there.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure I was there. I know I went 3 years in a row, and it was like 2014, 2015. Okay.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
That's awesome. While I was there, one of my colleagues who's here at Duke, his name is Professor Eric Spana, he was giving a talk on genetics and basically teaching genetics principles using inheritance of wizarding in Harry Potter. And he had this packed room. Like, people couldn't even get in the room because so many people wanted to see this. And I was like, this is brilliant. And I saw some other things like that too. He and Dr. Aaron McDonald, who now I ended up working with, they were doing one on biology and physics in the video game Mass Effect. And I went to part of that talk, and that was great too. But seeing that, I thought this was fantastic. So I reached out to Garrett Wong, who's the director of the Trek track at Dragon Con, who also, of course, as many people would know from the show here, that he plays Harry Kim on Star Trek Voyager. But I asked him, I was like, could I do something like this at a future Dragon Con? He's like, yeah, of course. We'd be happy to have more science in there. So I gave my first talk at a convention like that. It was in 2016 at Dragon Con. And since that time, it's been more and more and more. Very self-reinforcing because, it's fun to do. And I asked to do it. And other people then start hearing about it and say, well, maybe we can ask him to do it. And it built up. Around the same time is when I got contact from Princeton University Press, when they asked me to write a book for the general public and also give a public talk. Now, the challenging thing there is that the general public talk I used to give, outside of Star Trek, of course, was on evidence for evolution. And basically, why is evolution true? The problem is my former PhD advisor, Jerry Coyne, wrote a book titled Why Evolution is True. I honestly based my talk on his book. I'm like, I can't write another book that is just his book again.
Right.
Yeah. So she said, was there any other public talk you give? I was like, there is some.
Yeah.
It's a little out there for Princeton University Press, but maybe this. But she said, yeah, that sounds actually really interesting. And that was where that book came from. And it's fun because everything kind of reinforced on it. So I produced that book, obviously, and I gave the talk at Princeton. It's fascinating giving the talk at Princeton because there's a full range between like super hyper expert evolutionary biologists and people who thought that aliens are real and have been here and they've seen them and things like that. It was a very broad
They've been abducted. Oh.
Yeah, no, it was like, that was the audience there.
Oh, nice.
But I started giving more talks, and I mentioned Dr. Erin McDonald earlier. She and I were giving a talk at DragonCon in 2018. 3 people came and sat in the back. We were giving on science and Star Trek Discovery in the first season. 3 people came and sat in the back of the room, and they were Mary Chieffo, Jane Brooke, and Ken Mitchell, who were of course on the cast. Yeah, Jane Brooke came and talked to me and said, hey, I was an alum from Duke University. I said, oh my gosh, really? So I invited her actually to come give a talk at Duke, just about like her experience and things like that, and come speak to my class. So I was giving a class using my book as a textbook too. And she said, I'm not a biologist, right? And I said, yeah, no, it's fine. Come on over anyway. So she did. We've gotten to be friends since that time. What was great is she connected me with the writers for Star Trek Discovery. What I didn't know is what was happening at the same time is Dr. Erin McDonald was actually getting connected by a completely different set of things. So I finally had this meeting with Michelle Paradise, who's the showrunner for Star Trek Discovery, and she said, we'd like to bring you on to help with season 3. We're actually just brought somebody else on. She's going to, because this project's going to involve a combination of physics and biology. I hope it's okay. Her name's Dr. Erin McDonald.
That's amazing.
Exactly.
Meant to be.
Yeah, no. So I was like, I know her very well. We've given talks together, literally. I have her phone number and my cell phone already.
Can I ask really quick, like, what kind of things do you actually do on the show? Like, do they already have an idea and then they just ask you about it? Or do they ask you for just basically how-tos on certain subjects, depending on the script?
Let me clarify, before I answer the question, let me clarify one thing. So Dr. Erin McDonald is the science consultant for the Star Trek universe. So she is basically on retainer for the show. So she's the point person. I like to say she's the sheriff of science in Star Trek.
Gotcha.
And I'm somebody who's an occasional deputy.
Gotcha.
You're science consultant junior grade.
Basically, yeah, exactly. So if they have a question, she's there in many of the writers' rooms. She sees the script. She does most of the main stuff. But she's trained as a physicist. She's not trained as a biologist. So every now and then something will come up and she's like, okay, this is stuff.
This is not my thing.
Exactly. She calls it like warm squishy. So at that point, then she'll say, I think that maybe this should go to Mohamed. So then I get brought in. So it could be anything. It could be from, for example, it could be her literally just sending me a text about one line of dialogue saying like, hey, does this sound okay? And often I have to text her back and say, you have to tell me the context. Because I can correct the sentence, but if I don't know what's happening, I could be correcting it the wrong way. So that's like the minimalist version. It could be something about an episode. So for example, Star Trek Discovery in season 3, they reached out to me for the episode 5, I think it was called Die Trying. And they said, okay, we're going to have these aliens there. They're going to be arriving at the space station. They have to be sick, and it has to be based on something they've eaten. It has to be not communicable. It has to be hard to cure.
Ooh, okay.
What is it? What are the words around and stuff like that? So I suggested prions as a prion disease for this, kind of like mad cow disease, and put some text around that. So that was more a single episode kind of bit. It wasn't actually in the original version of that. There was going to be more to that plot line. It ended up being kind of minimal in the episode in the end because. Again, the point in time when we're working on the episode is often like 2 years before it actually comes out.
Right.
So I've often sometimes forgotten by the time it comes out, like, oh yeah, that's what was that? Or it could be something big. So for example, in season 4 of Discovery, they said that we want to have these truly alien aliens. We want there to be a big challenge in communicating with them, wherein they can't use any universal translators. What could this be? So I suggested, like, why don't we use chemical communication? And they said, okay, we'll put more on that. Like, what would it be? So I said, well, let's do it by hydrocarbons. This is what hydrocarbons look like. And basically sketched all these things with talking to the writers, dialogue, but also say the VFX folks in terms of what would be showing up on the computer screens and things like that too. So that's more the intense version. So it could be anywhere in that spectrum, from like a sentence to like a season-wide arc kind of point.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'd love it because as we've watched back the original series, we have many, many times said, boy, I wish they just talked to somebody who knew a little bit about science. There's been so many examples, and we'll talk about some of those later, but yeah.
We know enough to where we feel like we can bash the original series, and we do.
And it feels like, I mean, over the years they've kind of made some efforts to bring in quote unquote experts on things, but Voyager, and I can't wait till we get there. Voyager has famously failed in bringing in their indigenous people's consultant for Chakotay, who just he was a complete fraud.
Yeah, that's the problem. Exactly. They thought they had somebody.
Yeah.
It turned out this is before it was easy to do an online background check.
Yeah.
Even for the old series too, it's interesting. This is something I challenge students and things like that to do when I do this sort of thing in class. It's easy to, well, I shouldn't say it's easy. It's medium level to bash.
Mhm.
What I often say is like, fix it.
Yeah.
Like what should it be with the minimal possible, aside from just throwing out the whole plot saying this doesn't work. Like what's the minimum possible plot? And that's actually honestly more like what happens with actual consulting. Because I don't get to tell, like they come and say, we want to do this thing. I say, that's not possible.
Mhm.
They're just gonna be like, well, it sucks. That's what has to happen because story trumps science.
How can you get there?
Yeah.
How can you get there?
And that's the question. The question is yes, and here's how we get there, or at least get as close as possible. I mean, because sometimes there has to be a lead for the plot to work.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Allie and I are going to beam down to another fucking paradise planet. And when our away mission is over, we'll join you back in the conference room to talk about the science of Star Trek, the original series, Season 3, Episode 3, The Paradise Syndrome.
Woo, can't wait to chat about it.
Sir, contact with an object. It's moving toward us. No visual contact yet.
Deflectors, full intensity.
Mr. Sulu, yes, Captain. Anything on your scanners? It's coming at light speed.
Collision course. Visual contact.
Anything, over?
All wavelengths dominated by ionization effects, sir.
All engines full stop.
The establishing shot pans across a very Earth-like planet, the Pretty Lake, the famous Pretty Lake, nestled into some pine trees. And as KSM beam onto an old dirt path, we dip back into the wow, this is just like Earth playbook. Another fucking paradise planet that's just like Earth.
Kirk says that it's a little bit different from Earth. It's like a half a galaxy away. It's a different size. It's a different age. It's a different composition of Earth. So it's highly improbable that it would evolve similarly to Earth in any way.
Put a pin in that. We'll bring that topic to our special guest this week. Because we've seen in several episodes, they get into this idea of like, is it a correct to expect that humanoid life similar to ours would be all over the galaxy or not? And I think one episode, they even named what was that called? They named a principle of science or something. Hodgkin's law of parallel planet development.
Right.
So in a bunch of episodes, it was like, there's no way this could happen. It's so incredibly unlikely. And then in this one episode, it's like, oh yeah, this happens all the time. So we'll get back to that with our guest, Dr. Noor, in a moment.
So the whole purpose of them going into this fucking planet in the first place, the planet is called Amaran, and they're supposed to stop an asteroid that's on a collision path and destroying the planet. So they know that there's a primitive group of people on the planet, and they just want to protect them. So that's the whole goal. Now, I don't know why they decided to make a pit stop and go to the planet when the asteroid is like 2 months away.
Yeah.
And they have to divert the asteroid within a specific window of time. Why do they beam down to the planet to check it out?
Right. They should be at the asteroid doing the asteroid problem, not like taking a quick vacation first.
They're fucking around smelling flowers and honeysuckle and shit.
Around the bend, they discover a large alien obelisk-looking thing with strange markings on it, which Spock finds fascinating, of course. He can't scan through whatever this metal is and suggests that only a civilization equal to theirs or more advanced could have built such a thing. Allie, would you like to talk about ancient aliens now?
Of course.
We have a strange alien obelisk that doesn't belong in this planet at all. It's the pyramids all over again.
It was alien. It had to be. It's absolutely valid that it's alien because it probably is in this instance. But for us, yeah.
Yeah. So they scan for the closest concentration of life forms, ready to seek out new life. But there's a problem. The asteroid on the collision course is like on the clock now to get it nudged out of the way before it's too late. And Spock over-explains this, of course, as he does. But he says they have to be at warp within 30 minutes or it'll be too late. They won't be able to get there in time.
Why the fuck did you even go down there?
Yeah.
Sightseeing.
Yeah.
But across a lake, they see what looks like what we know to be indigenous people of America. They call them American Indians, and that's what McCoy says. They look like American Indians, and Spock confirms that they actually are. They're a mixture of Navajo and Mohican and Delaware tribes. So I'm like, how the fuck did they get there?
Yeah, because this begs the question, which we'll talk about later. Did they develop this way, or were they brought here or something? Like, what? It's so incredibly unlikely, like we said, that such a civilization would be so similar.
And Spock, again, he says it's highly improbable that they're capable of building this obelisk. They're just really primitive. And McCoy's like, he wants to tell them, but that would be breaking the prime directive. We should tell them that there's a flaming asteroid coming to,
Flaming Asteroid is a band name.
Oh, good one. Oh, flaming asteroid. Are you writing that down?
Yeah.
Nice flaming asteroid.
Spock says that they're too primitive to grasp the concept of space flight, so we'd just confuse and frighten them. It's going to be a long episode, y'all. Lots of ignorant, savage tropes abound. Strap in.
Kirk says, let's get back to the Enterprise. So they make their way. For some reason, they got to go back to where they beamed in because they could have just beamed out right then. But whatever.
Right.
And Kirk is feeling a little bit wistful at the paradise that's surrounding him. And McCoy's like, what's wrong? And he says, this is just so peaceful and uncomplicated. No problems, no command decisions, and just living. I think he's just tired of all the decisions.
Yeah.
I think he's tired. He needs a vacation.
McCoy says this is a typical paradise reaction in humans, something we used to call Tahiti syndrome, which is, I think, made up for this episode. I don't think that's a real thing. However, if you're thinking that's a band name, unfortunately for us, it already is a band name. There is a group called Tahiti Syndrome.
I think that's cool.
I have not listened to their stuff yet, but they have to go on our Spotify list. But they describe themselves as New York City noise pop, psych rock, and post-punk.
I can't wait to check this out because I'm so curious of what that genre is.
Yeah.
Never heard of it.
I couldn't find any upcoming tour dates, but they recently played several stops in North and South Carolina. So there you go, Tahiti Syndrome.
Nice.
So Kirk's decided to take one more look at this obelisk. And like an idiot, he just walks right up the stairs onto the platform. And he's sort of like feeling up the wall, like
touching the, like
he's reading Braille or something. And then, he flips open his communicator and he calls up Scotty. And suddenly, the platform he's standing on moves like a trapdoor, and he falls down the hole into the chamber below.
Spock and McCoy have no idea of where they weren't around. They were doing their own thing, so they didn't even see him fall.
That's some ancient alien shit right there. Secret compartment hiding in like a secret room underneath the thing.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Totally. I'm not saying it was aliens, but it was aliens.
In the chamber, there's kind of this computer panel thing between two large metal pieces, and there's more of the alien hieroglyphics all over the place. And as Kirk, he's on the ground, he tries to grab the panel to stand up and he brace himself on it.
I think he mashed some buttons by accident.
Yeah. He fucking Control-Alt-deleted that shit, and it beeps and boops, and lightning goes flying and knocks his ass onto the floor. Spock records the captain's log as we see Kirk unconscious in the chamber below the obelisk. And Spock and McCoy are up on the surface, walking around scanning, trying to find Kirk. Spock is standing on the trapdoor. But when he calls up Scotty, nothing happens. And that was the first maybe indication to me that this thing is opened by a sound pattern of some sort. Like when Kirk flipped his communicator open and it chirped, maybe that was the tone that triggered the thing.
Did Spock's not chirp?
It did, but it didn't. But it didn't open the door.
Okay. Spock calls up Scotty and they've given up looking for him. Well, Spock has given up looking for him because they're on a time schedule. They had only had 30 minutes in the first place. And now they've lost one of them and they can't find Kirk. So he tells Scotty to, ready to beam up. We've got to go. And McCoy's like, what? We're leaving? You cannot be serious. We can't leave him here.
McCoy does we got to do something. We can't just leave, but offers no solutions. Classic
exactly.
McCoy.
His usual. So Spock tries to explain it to the doctor like he got some sense. Okay, look, the asteroid is as big as Earth's fucking moon. It's coming towards you right now. It's 2 months away. And the angle that it's at right now is the best angle to try to divert it. The closer it gets, the angle changes. And if we don't divert it now, then it's going to be too late to change the angle. But then McCoy's like, but what about Jim? That's like 2 months from now. He could be injured or dying. We got to save him. Spock's like, well, we can come back and resume the search, but we got to do this thing right now.
So Spock gets down on the ground and picks up some stones. And he's this is the planet. This is the meteor. This is your brain. This is your brain on drugs.
Any questions?
Let me get out the crayons. I mean, McCoy is just not thinking or listening or hearing what Spock is trying to say.
So this rock explanation is really kind of calling McCoy an idiot, but it's also calling us, the audience, kind of stupid too, that this is the level of explanation that needs to be given.
I mean, maybe it was in the 60s or I don't know.
Yeah.
Because maybe science wasn't a big thing. I don't know. Back in the 60s. But I mean, what is that math? Is it physics? Whereas you talk about angles and like velocity and all that stuff.
Yeah, physics, I think.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, in the chamber, Kirk comes to and he's got amnesia.
Well, how's our amnesia patient this morning?
I don't know. I haven't been feeling like myself lately.
Doesn't know who he is, where he is, or what anything is, including the heater and StarTech that he's holding. He's like, they're familiar. I should know what they are, but also I don't know shit.
I guess he got a hold of some really good weed. I don't know. I mean, that's
that weed brain right there.
Good ass weed.
He's on some, what did we call that? Was that last week? The galactic ganja. He's on some galactic ganja.
Courtesy of Snoop himself. So when he walks up the stairs and the thing slides open and you can see all the smoke comes out as if he's been in a car with Snoop. But he walks out into the sunshine and there happens to be the tropes again. These two young women dressed in buckskin dresses with a band around their heads, long dark hair, that kind of thing.
It was a costume like what people in my parents' generation, and mine to some extent, would wear for Halloween costumes.
Yeah. We don't do that shit.
No, don't cosplay as
someone's culture.
Yeah.
We don't do that shit no more. That is not cute.
Nope.
But so they're carrying baskets of food and then they see him come out of the obelisk and they start kneeling. Oh my gosh.
Of course they're going to think it's a god.
It's something they can't explain. He doesn't look like them. He comes out of this obelisk thing. And so she goes up to him and she takes his hand and puts it on her forehead. And Kirk's like, who the fuck are you? Who the fuck are you? And she says that we are your people and we've been waiting for you.
Spock records another log. The delay on the planet means that they'll have to drive over the speed limit to get to the asteroid. And Scotty's like, I can't give you warp 9 much longer, Mr. Spock. These engines are going to blow.
Spock's like, we cannot reduce speed, stress or not. We were late. Sorry, it's our fault. But we can't miss the deflection point. So we've got to get there.
In the natives' lodge, Kirk is with the village elder now, and the problematic Native American stereotypes just keep ratcheting up. Apparently, the woman that Kirk met at the obelisk was Miramani, their priestess, and that obelisk is their temple. And, of course, they have some old legend about somebody appearing from the temple. Prophecy fulfilled! Doo-doo-doo-doo.
But Kirk admits, like, I don't know who I am. I have no memory. There's so much that's strange to me, but I'll tell you what I can. And then there's this guy named Salish, who apparently is the chief medicine man. And he's like, this guy doesn't know anything about what you're telling him. How can he save us? How can he be our god? And this guy looks familiar. He looks like someone that I've seen in a Western. Because he's probably been in Gunsmoke or something.
Not this guy, Rudy Solari. He was in The Bionic Woman, Charlie's Angels.
I wonder, was he a villain? He's got that face.
You're right. I would expect to see him in a lot of like Western stuff.
Playing an indigenous person, probably.
Yeah, right.
They loved doing that shit back then.
Yeah, they did. Here we go. 12 O'Clock High. Oh, he's done an episode of The Outer Limits. 2 episodes of The Outer Limits.
Oh, I love that show.
Perry Mason, Voyage to the Bottom of the Sea.
Cool.
Alfred Hitchcock. Oh, no. Yeah, here it is. Have Gun Will Travel. Gunsmoke. Death Valley Days. Yeah, there's a whole lot of stuff in here that are probably very problematic.
Yeah. Yep.
So Salish says something about like they know nothing of our danger and talk about like being saved. So are they aware of this asteroid situation? Is that what he's saying?
It sounds like it. I mean, it's 2 months away and they're talking about skies darkening. Would you see? I don't know. They don't strike me.
What if so maybe the asteroid is on like a orbital collision course, like it's getting closer
like
and closer or something.
Mm-hmm.
And when it passes in front of their sun, that's the sky darkening. But also, as we see later, the effects that happen on the planet is not something that would be caused by a meteor or asteroid or whatever blocking the sun.
2 months away.
Yeah, like the wind and the storms and all of that stuff.
And the earthquakes. Yeah, no, I don't know. And it seems like, I mean, we know primitive people had like a rudimentary understanding of like astronomy.
Yeah.
Like they knew about like how things sort of were in the sky.
Yeah.
Rudimentary. But you're right. It doesn't explain the wind and all the stuff that's happening on the planet.
So when a god shows up on a planet, most people bow to the god, but there's always some skeptics like us. And what's the skeptic going to do in this situation? Fucking prove it.
Yeah.
You're a god? Prove it. So Salish demands that Kirk prove he's a god. And the elder's like, yeah, okay, so here's the legend. The legend says lots of danger. The wise ones that planted us here will send a god to rouse the temple spirit, quiet the skies, and save us. Is that you? Are you that guy? Kirk's too amnesiac, though. He has no idea who he is, why he's here, what's going on.
No doubt about it, you have amnesia. Now, the problem is you were found with no identification and, oddly enough, wearing no clothing. So, I did some research into the major nudist colonies in the area, and I think I've come up with something.
And he says, yeah, I came from the temple, and it was a beginning for me here. So, because he doesn't remember shit anyway. But he says, but he has a feeling he comes from the sky too, but he just can't remember.
As if on cue, to test this whole "are you a god" theory, Miramani comes rushing in with a boy who got caught in a fishing net and sank to the bottom of the river and basically like drowned. And Salish checks him out, but he says there's no sound in the body. Of course, they don't have a highly advanced medical whatever, but he puts his head up to this kid and he can't hear any heartbeat, so there's no sound in the body and there's no light in the eyes. He's dead, Miramani.
Oh my god! They've killed
The boy.
you bastards!
Yeah, there's no, please state the nature of the medical emergency. Yeah, so Kirk is like, wait a second. Somehow he remembers his CPR training. He takes the boy, lays him down, I guess gives him sort of mouth to mouth as we know it. And
he starts humming Another One Bites the Dust as he's doing compressions and rescue breaths.
And also Staying Alive. I guess it's the same. Staying
I had a great CPR instructor. I think this was at the district that taught. So Staying Alive and Another One Bites the Dust have essentially the same BPM. And so you can use either one. One of them's a little more hopeful but either one will work while you're doing compressions.
Yeah.
So,
he starts doing some stuff to his legs too, which I don't remember. So I did take a CPR course when you have to give them mouth to mouth and chest compressions.
right.
There's some stuff you do to people's legs when they pass out, but he was massaging the boy's legs and stuff, and also giving him mouth to mouth, and he coughs and the kid kind of wakes up.
Do you think there's a Federation Heart Association like there is an American Heart Association? Like, did they expand over the years?
Is that the FHA?
They're the ones that teach the CPR now, the
Could be.
FHA.
I mean, but they just run a scanner over you, and they don't have to like ever touch you in the Federation anymore because technology.
So Kirk has revived this boy, and now, of course, everybody thinks he's a god.
Mm.
The elder turns to Salish and says, "See, he's a god. Do you still question? Give him the medicine badge."
This is so cold.
Yes. This is like taking a pip away or something. Like you're being demoted and I'm taking the pip off of you, but giving it to someone else.
Right. While they're standing there, she snatches it from Salish's head and is like, Here, Jim, you're the god now.
This is what Kirk needs to do with McCoy and Mbenga. He needs to take away the chief medical officer's badge and give it to Mbenga.
Right in front of him. Oh my God. Yes.
Everybody's got their heads covered. They're like bowing their heads and covering their eyes. And a few beats of this, and then Salish takes his hands away and stares at Kirk, and he's like shaking, like visibly shaking.
Pissed. PIS.
Back on the Enterprise, they're approaching the asteroid, and again, Spock is like yelling for full power, and Scotty's like, I kind of do it.
Chekhov is counting down deflection point -7, and they're going back, a lot of back and forth between Spock and Scott and Spock. Scott saying, I can't do it. The relays are going to overload. Spock says, do it anyway. And then Chekhov is telling him how far they have. And they get to deflection point -4, and then Spock says, stop, hold position, prepare to activate the deflectors. Suddenly the power starts dropping, but then Spock is like, give me some fucking power. And then Chekhov chimes in that they are now at the 0 point of deflection and they've got to do what they need to do. So Spock gives the order, they activate the deflectors, and then they shoot out a beam and hit the asteroid. The power drops, and then Spock wants to check the degree of deflection, but it's not enough. It's only 0.0013 degrees, and I'm not sure how much they needed, but it wasn't enough. I don't know if they were late or if it would have worked anyway.
Right. No, I think it was the power. So they tried to maintain warp 9 on their way back there, and that fucked up a bunch of circuits, and then they fire off the deflector, and the dilithium crystal circuit burns out.
Because they've already taxed the fucking ship. Okay, so it is because they were late.
Yeah. If they hadn't had to drive over the speed limit to get there, they would have been fine.
That they ran out of fucking
Leave
gas.
early, friends. That's all you got to do. Just leave a little earlier. You get to work on time. No big deal. You'll get pulled over for speeding. So the asteroid moved, but not far enough. So Spock, for some reason, orders them into the path of the asteroid and intends to retreat in front of it until they get the phasers ready to go. So now we couldn't move it, so now we're going to blow it up. And McCoy is not a fan of this. He's like, that could impair the Enterprise. But my question was, and this goes unanswered, if you hit one large asteroid with your phasers, wouldn't you then have thousands of or millions of smaller asteroids?
Yep.
Many of them on course for that planet still?
Or other places, because I don't know how physics works in space, but maybe it explodes or maybe it doesn't. I don't know. So maybe it doesn't go all, I don't know.
And if you shoot at an asteroid, if they were able to move, let's say that this mission was successful, roll credits, and we're off to our next adventure. So the asteroid didn't hit this planet, but it's likely to hit some planet.
There's another show. Yeah. Where they've got to go save another planet from a big chunk that still is really big.
Yeah.
Most of the time, like we know we have meteors, and I guess they're called meteors when they're small enough that they don't really hurt anything. So they just burn up in the atmosphere, and then they're just a little rock by the time they get to us. And those should be okay. But yeah, The big chunks. Yeah.
Asteroids all the way down. Remember 2 scenes ago when Salish was staring at Kirk and shaking like a madman? There's a good reason for that. Miramani is down lakeside fetching some water, and Salish comes up all, what are you doing and why aren't you working on our ritual cloak, for our wedding? It's tradition. The tribal priestess, and here we go again, tribal priestess and medicine chief are always joined. It was very like tropey fucking stereotype bullshit. But she's like, Salish, you really don't want to push too hard on that tradition, because he is the medicine chief now. So I kind of got to marry him, and you need to move the fuck on.
Yeah, she did not seem that bothered at all about it. First of all, yeah, the trope, the whole arranged marriage thing.
Yep.
But she wasn't terribly in love with him, but he seemed really in love with her. But she kind of like tries to placate him. It's like, you're such a great guy. Anyone would be lucky to have you. But he's like, I don't want anyone else. He's like, but then she pulls out the culture card and is like, you don't have a choice. He's the god. He's now the medicine chief. I snatched that thing off your head. That means he's the one, But then he asks, like, well, if you could choose, would you choose me? Crickets.
Just walk away. It's not. This is not. Breaking up is not easy. Breaking up is hard to do. Oh, now I got that. Write that down.
Yeah, breaking up is hard to do. Yeah.
But once she's said, "Hey, it's over," just go. Just walk away. Don't do the. Oh, but don't you think this and don't. Well, what? Can you tell me? Yeah. Can you at least tell me why that? No, just you don't want to know. Just go.
Yeah. So yeah, that makes it worse.
In the lodge building, Kirk is carving holes in a gourd of some kind, probably so he can fuck it. And Miramani comes in and she's all, perhaps you would like to bathe now. She's like dying to get him out of his clothes.
In the meantime, he's just trying to get info. He's like, tell me about the wise ones. But she's like, shouldn't you know everything? You're God. But he's like, nope, not this one. And while she's talking, she's still trying to get him out of his shirt. She's like, how do you get this open? And she says, the wise ones brought us here from far away. They chose a medicine chief to keep the secret of the temple. In meantime, in all of this, she's still trying to get his shirt off.
Kirk's like, secrets of the temple. And that made me think of Legends of the Hidden Temple. Have you ever, it's a game show on Nickelodeon from like back in the day? No?
Nope.
Man, it's so strange. We're not that far apart in age, and yet the things that our pop culture is so different sometimes. So this was a Nickelodeon game show, and they had these teams competing against each other kind of thing. Legends of the Hidden Temple was you had different teams competing, and there were like trivia questions or something that they had to answer, and then you kind of, elimination style get down to the one final team, and they have to go one by one into the temple, which is like a cutaway of like this 3-story thing. It's got like 6 or 8 rooms or something in it.
Oh, cool.
And you had to go like from room to room and solve puzzles. But if you got caught, then your teammate had to go in behind you. And yeah, it was great.
It sounds a lot like the Crystal Maze, which is a British show. And it was like in the 90s, I think. And it was pretty old, but it sounds like the Crystal Maze was hilarious. These were adults, though, not kids. And they would basically have this like temple, and you choose what kind of room you want to go to.
That sounds so good. I need to watch that.
It's fun. It's
I wonder
hilarious.
if they're related at all. Legends of the Hidden Temple was from like in the mid 90s, early to mid 90s.
This was 90s too, late 90s, and they go into a room and have to solve a puzzle. Maybe they have to read a hieroglyph and move some blocks and to open a door. That kind of thing.
Yeah.
If they didn't get out in time, they would get stuck there, and then their teammate would have to go on to the next puzzle. And then if they solved it, they could get them out. And then at the end, you get to be in this huge tube of like gold paper. They'd have to grab the gold paper while it was blowing around in the wind.
Okay.
And then depending on how many you got would determine how much money you got. So it was really cool.
Miramani tugs at Kirk's uniform shirt, and she's like, there's no lacing. How the hell do I get this off of you? She just keeps trying to figure out the shirt. But Kirk's asking about the legends of the Hidden Temple. So this secret that was passed down father to son because patriarchy. But Salish doesn't know the secret because his father died before he told him. Isn't this a terrible idea? The idea of like, I'm supposedly an ancient and also like advanced alien species. And I plopped you on this planet with this device that only one person knows how to get into and make it go. And that one person is going to tell their son, who's going to tell their son, who's going to tell their son. That sounds like a bad idea. First of all, what happens if you only have daughters?
Right.
Yeah, or in this case, the father dies before he's able to tell him. This is certain doom.
You would think that like whoever put the obelisk there, they would have a better plan than that. You're right. Bad idea. I'm surprised they didn't draw in caves or anything. Nothing.
You know,
it's all verbal.
Some women come in with trays of fruit again, as probably an offering or whatever, and they're followed by the village elder, and he's like, "Hey, so, Mr. God, sir, we'd really like to honor your name, but silly me, I didn't catch it. What's your name again?"
Kirk, of course, obviously he doesn't remember, so he's like, he gets like bits and pieces. So he starts saying Kirk, or whatever, and the elder just kind of takes that and runs with it. Kirok? Are you trying to say Kirok? Okay, hey, that's your name.
The women leave now that they have a name to moan while they're fantasizing about Kirok.
Oh, Kirok. The elder is like, have we displeased you in some way? And he's like, no, everything's fine. But the elder feels like we must somehow have disappointed you. Is it the way we live? Maybe we haven't improved as quickly as you wished, as the wise ones wished.
Kirk dismisses this God displeased theory. He's like, you have rich land and happy people. What's not to love? But there's still something, and it's just underneath Kirk's amnesia. He says he's happy and peaceful here, and he thinks it might be the first time he's ever felt this way.
Wow. Ever? I mean,
ever.
He doesn't remember, so how would he know?
Right? The elder leaves, and Miramani gets right to flirting. Kirk's like, I don't get why people think I can help them. Yeah, I came from the obelisk, and sure, I brought that child back to life. He just can't remember, though. And Miramani's like, here, there's much time for all kinds of things. And she's got her hands all over him at this point. Smash cut to the bridge of the Enterprise, and Scotty's like, there is no time!
They're putting themselves like right in front of the asteroid, and they've determined the weakest point. So Chekhov is like, we're almost dead center, and Spock tells them to lock all phasers on that mark, maximum intensity, narrow beam. I want to split that son of a bitch right wide open.
Speaking of splitting things wide open, back at Kirok's hut. No, so they fire the phasers one by one, and each time they cut down to engineering, and Scotty's freaking out. Like, stop fucking, this isn't going to work. And he says, that Vulcan won't be satisfied till these panels are a puddle of lead. So they're blowing relays left and right, and despite this, Spock orders a simultaneous bombardment. So we shot the phasers one at a time. Now, let's just push all the buttons at once.
And poor Scotty, you know, his engineering equipment, it's like his children. He's like, my parents, my poor parents. And they're going dark. He's lost all engineering.
Kirok wakes up in the lodge now wearing native attire. And Miramani comes in to announce that the ritual cloak is finished, so we can get married now. And Kirok's like, the what you say?
You know, I'm the daughter of the chief, and our laws are like, I get married to you because you're our leader.
For a moment, Miramani thinks there might be another lady, and there is, the Enterprise.
That's true.
But
that's true.
Kirok can't remember the Enterprise, so what the hell? Let's get married.
Miramani, I didn't realize this. She says God's wish above tribal law. Weird. Kirk is like, okay, fine. What's the day? Name the day.
And she's like, tomorrow. we gotta get it together now.
Yeah. Well, I mean, he should be happy about that.
And he is, because he pulls her in for a big old kiss. On the Enterprise, Spock is studying images of the obelisk, while Scotty's on speakerphone yelling about the engines. Warp drive is gone now. All they have is impulse, and it'll take the nearest repair base to get them fixed. For some reason, McCoy is in Spock's quarters. Like, why did Spock open the door for him? Because he knows how it's going to be. McCoy's just in there bitching at Spock.
Yeah.
You and your damn calculated Vulcan way. He says, you lost for us, lost for the planet, and you lost for Jim. And another thing, you've been pushing yourself too hard. You can get some rest.
He's such a dick. Like, make up your mind. He's chastising him 1 minute and then trying to take care of him the next. It's like slapping someone and then kissing the where it's burned.
Yeah.
Where does it hurt? That's how he is. It drives me nuts. Spock is like trying to figure out the obelisk because nobody else is. I mean, McCoy's not doing anything but bitching. So they're going to go back to the planet. He tells Chekhov to just start heading back to the planet. And without warp speed, it's going to take months. But Spock knows it's going to take exactly 59.223 days. And the asteroid is going to be like 4 hours behind them. So they've got to get to the planet first, unless they come up with something else in the meantime. So that's why he's, focusing on the obelisk to see what he can come up with.
McCoy has another fit, though, and he's accusing Spock of not listening to him. And you're just staring at that stupid picture of the obelisk, and he gets pissed off and he storms out.
I hate him. I don't. He's a much needed character. You got to have the antagonist.
Mm-hmm. Back on the planet, Miramani is preparing for the wedding, talking to her maidens about how this joining day is a joy for all their people, but not all their people, because standing in the doorway listening in, and nobody noticed this, there stands Salish, and he's pissed.
Yep. The elder leaves, and then Kirk is at the obelisk kind of just enjoying his new life, and he's like, I can't believe I got this hot chick, and they think I'm a god. I mean, I found paradise. Surely nobody's ever attained such happiness. He goes to, I guess, leave, but Salish is there blocking his way with a knife. And Kirk's like, oh, get out of my way, Salish. I feel like they just kind of didn't acknowledge his feelings at all. They just kind of, just ignored him. They stripped away his being a medicine man. He took his woman, and he just thought he was going to go away.
Right. Yeah. Salish has like big... Does anyone here have any reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony? Yeah, me vibes.
Yeah, totally. Speak now or forever hold your peace.
Kirok's like, tough shit, I'm marrying your girl. What you going to do about it? So he lunges forward with the knife, and in this scuffle, Kirok gets his hand sliced open, and there's blood, and of course, gods don't bleed.
Star Trek fight! Kirk pins Salish to the ground, and Salish is just like, kill me. Just kill me.
He's because like, either you kill me, or I'm going to spend the rest of my life proving that the white man isn't the god.
Right. But Kirk doesn't kill him, but he just throws a knife away and walks away.
We get a short cutaway to the wedding ceremony. Kirok is wearing this cloak that looks like it's made with a bunch of differently colored feathers from all of those boas in the costuming room. Mm-hmm. And he and the priestess are standing before the elder.
They're about to we're going to the chapel and we're gonna get married.
McCoy lets himself into Spock's quarters again, rips into him about being overworked, undernourished, and needing rest. And of course, Spock is like, Vulcans can go long periods without food and rest. Back the fuck off. I gotta figure out what this markings are on this obelisk. And Spock does that thing, little fucker. He does that thing that you do when you tell your kids, like, honey, it's time for bed, turn the lights out and go to sleep. And so then they turn the lights out and wait about 30 seconds until they think you're back in bed, and then they get up and turn the light back on.
Yeah, because McCoy is a fucking nag right now. Like, he's a nag. So, yeah.
So Spock lays down in bed to get McCoy to leave, and no sooner does the door shut than Spock's back up at his computer with his dick in his hand, looking at Pornhub. The internet is for porn. The internet is for porn.
Grab your dick and double click for porn.
He's looking at obelisk porn. That's a new brand of porn.
Yes.
Back on the planet, I think a lot of time has passed since it's going to take them like 50 some days to get to the planet. Kirk has been married basically for like almost 2 months, and they're frolicking in the forest and playing games and chasing each other, and they're really in love, you know. Kirk says, you know, I'm happy. I'm so happy. If it weren't for the dreams, my mind would be completely at peace. And I guess that means he's been having nightmares.
Miramani's like, hang on, you're still having those nightmares? The ones about the lodge in the sky or whatever? So obviously he's dreaming about the Enterprise. But now not only have those dreams returned, he's also seeing faces, and he thinks these are people he should probably know. And worse, he has this weird feeling that his place is with them and not here with her.
Uh-oh. Well, I wonder if she said this next thing just because she felt like she was losing him. She's like, I got a gift for you.
It might make you happy.
She goes out and then she comes back in with this sort of basket thing that indigenous women carry their baby in, or what at least the show portrays. And she's like, I'm going to have a baby. We're going to have a baby.
She pulls out a positive pregnancy test, and the camera cuts over to Maury, and he's like,
So, when it comes to
Miramani's
Child.
James, you are the father.
You know, you're on an alien planet, and you're just like fucking around, and you're just getting women pregnant.
Kirk's happy about this news, and they like make out some more. He's bought into this. I am Kirk, the god of your whatever. Like he is taking on this role.
He's strangely okay with it.
So for some reason, he can't remember who he is, where he is, or why he is, but he can remember CPR and something else that I forgot already. And apparently he knows how to take lake water into canals and use it for irrigation.
Yeah. The next scene, he's showing the villagers how to route water from a canal and drawing on the ground using like dirt and sticks and shit. Because how do you, like, he knows that he has that residual knowledge, but doesn't know who the fuck he is.
And the gourd from earlier, not a fuck toy at all. It was a lamp. So how does he know how to make a lamp out of a gourd of all things? Anyway.
What was I don't know. And he's like, hey, look, you can cook twice as much food.
The classic 60s sexism rears its ugly head again here. She's like, you made this fucking lamp so I would never know when it's nighttime, and you just be in here barefoot, pregnant, and cooking all the time.
Get in the kitchen, bitch.
Make me a sandwich.
I mean, that's really fucked up.
Yeah.
Right?
Kirk's like, no, honey, no, that's not why I made the lamp at all. And he tries to kiss her into silence, but outside, the thunder crashes. The thunder rolls and the lightning strikes.
Oh, God. Jesus Christ. Yeah, life has caught up with them. The sky is darkening as promised by the wise ones. A wind starts. Kirk pushes this off. It's like, it's only, it's just a thunderstorm. And Miramani's like, you're the god, so why am I getting scared? Because I know you're going to fix this. And she's like, it's time. And Kirk's like, huh? It's time to go to the temple. The people will be waiting.
Apparently, it's about to get a lot worse, too. Not only will the sky darken, the lake will go wild, the earth will tremble.
Human sacrifice, dogs and cats living together, mass hysteria.
Kirk's like, listen, I don't know how to get into the temple. Uh-oh. So what kind of god is this? He doesn't know about the old ones or whatever they're called. He doesn't know how to get into his own temple. And he bleeds. What kind of god is this guy?
He's a shit god, man.
And the Elder and Salish come in and they're like, why the fuck aren't you at the temple yet? Like, you get down there and save us. And Kirk's like, I got an idea. Why don't you all go into the caves? That'll be safe. And the Elder's like, caves in an earthquake? Are you a fucking idiot? That's the most dangerous place to be, is in the caves. Salish is the skeptic here. He's the, surely you're not a god if this is all you can do.
I honestly don't think of him as the bad guy.
No.
He's not the bad guy. He's questioning. He should be. You don't take everything that at face value. You got to know. You got to have proof.
Yeah. Miramani gives Kirk a little pep talk, and he walks over to the other men and says, take care of her. And the camera cuts to Salish, and he's got this, oh yeah, I'll take care of her look on his face.
I thought you'd never ask.
So for some reason, I guess it's that Kirk's into this character now, but he puts on the medicine chief headband and goes to the temple, and the wind is like whipping dust all over the place. And guess who's sneaking around the woods spying on him? It's Salish.
He's supposed to be taking care of Miramani, but he's not. He's sneaking around. But I mean, it's interesting. Why would Kirk actually try to make it happen? You know what I mean? Why would he go through the motions? Maybe he wanted it to be true, or because I don't know that he believed it, but was he just humoring? It's interesting.
If this is, if you were struck with amnesia and you remember literally nothing, like your brain is like a blank, like you. I guess this is the common things that we remember, like CPR and English or whatever. But like you would just, you'd be so subject to
they're telling
suggestion.
me
that
I guess I should be. And
no. So he goes up onto this thing and he starts screaming, I am Kirk, I have come.
As gods do. That's what they say.
Yes. No. Behold.
Yep.
And nothing happens. The door doesn't open. He can't get into the temple. And we go to commercial with Salish and this big old smile on his face. He is enjoying this failure. McCoy comes into Spock's quarters again and catches him not in bed resting, but sitting up holding his Vulcan lyre. And he's like, I thought I told you to go to fucking sleep. And Spock's like, well, pedantically, doctor, you prescribed rest, not sleep. And, I'm Vulcan, so rest is different for us. I'm playing music, and that's restful. Also, working on this puzzle is restful for me, too, so maybe just leave me the fuck alone. How about that?
Because you can't fucking help anyway.
No. Spock's broken the code. He's figured it out.
It's musical notes. How come everywhere I go, I'm so... It always comes down to music. It's like mathematical anyway, I think, right?
Yeah, very much so. As he suspected, the obelisk is a marker, and it was left by a super race known as the Preservers. That's totally another band name, right? Like the Proclaimers, the Preservers.
Totally. We need a t-shirt.
They passed through the galaxy, rescuing primitive cultures, which were in danger of extinction, and seeding them on other planets.
All I can see is somebody just jerking off and just like... Because I'm seeding you and then sperm it going everywhere.
Oh God!
It's like I hate that term, but we've heard it so many times in other episodes. TOS.
So also, like, talk about a white savior complex, right? These aliens that are supposedly ancient and all powerful, stopping by planets and just checking in, like, hey, how y'all doing? Oh my gosh, these people over here are about to get genocided by these people over there. We should probably take some of them against their will, I assume, because they're not talking to them. They're just, and then drop them on another planet. This is the weirdest shit.
It is literally like a garden, like when you grow in a garden and you move a plant from one to another. The plant doesn't get to choose. You take the plant and you you put it in a paper towel and it sprouts and shit like that. Like, that's exactly, it's like, they're fucking with people's lives with no empathy or thought.
Yeah. So this episode's hypothesis on why do we run into so many humanoid Earth-like beings on all of these episodes of Star Trek, the original series, is that these preservers, this superior alien race, seeded all of these planets. Put a pin in that. That's a great question for us to talk to Dr. Noor about. And not only that, McCoy suggests they must have survived here because the preservers put an asteroid deflector on the planet, and now it's defective and needs fixed. Why would McCoy know anything about that?
Out of the fucking blue. Totally.
Yeah. That was a quick leap.
Yeah, they were like, hurry up, we got to get to the end of this. We got to come up with something.
Anyway, McCoy says they have to find this deflector now and get it back online. And surely I am not the only person who immediately thought at this moment, oh, it's the obelisk, you idiot.
Yeah.
Like, surely that would have been the first thing that came to their mind, right?
Of course, because that's what they're even talking about. Spock and McCoy, and it's got to be the obelisk.
Yeah. Well, speaking of the obelisk, the villagers have gathered round for a good old-fashioned stoning.
It can't be anything about gods without somebody throwing some rocks, you know? So sure enough, and Salish is the ringleader. He brought like angry mob.
Standing out here yelling rabble, rabble, rabble isn't going to help anything.
Right. Let's throw some rocks. And they're yelling at Kirk, die, die, die.
Miramani shows up and she's there to join her man, despite Salish trying to stop her. And she runs up to Kirk, and Kirk tries to protect her from these stones as they just keep flying in from off camera at them. Spock and McCoy beam in nearby. So they must not be concerned about the Prime Directive either, because they just beam in like, you know, within vision.
The Prime Directive. How often have you broken it?
See, the Prime Directive has many different functions.
The Prime Directive?
There's more what you call guidelines than actual rules.
It's a very interesting proposition. I can think of it.
I guess if it's an emergency, they disregard the Prime Directive.
I guess. Or it's even numbered episodes. We just don't worry about the Prime Directive.
Yeah, so they beam in. Miramani is kind of hurt. Kirk is also fallen. And the crowd runs away, though, when they see Spock and McCoy beam in. But then McCoy looks at Kirk and he's like, I need Nurse Chapel. So he calls up to the Enterprise and has Nurse Chapel come down with a medical kit. And Kirk is like, my wife, is she all right? And McCoy's like, what?
Spock and McCoy kind of look at each other like, what the hell's wrong with him?
What has he been doing? Well, we know what he's been doing, but what has
he's been doing her. So Chapel beams in and gives Miramani a hypospray of something and then goes to Kirk. Miramani comes to just enough to talk to Spock, explain that Kirk couldn't get back into the temple, and Spock's like, of course not. He didn't come from there. And she's like, yeah, I saw him.
And Chapel is like, I don't think he recognizes us. And McCoy says he scans him and he says his brain's impaired. Everything else is functioning, especially his dick. But except his memory is not functioning. And Spock wants to know if he can help him. And McCoy said it'll take time, but they don't have any time. They've got like 65 minutes before that asteroid gets there. So they got to get the move on.
Spock suggests a mind meld, but for some reason, and this is a DC Fontana episode, and she should know better, they called it the Vulcan mind fusion, not a mind meld.
And I think they called it mind meld in some previous
I think
episodes.
so. I think that's established at this point, right?
Yeah. Why would they switch?
So Spock finger bangs Kirk.
Remember.
And soon their minds are joined and they start like speaking in unison. I am Kirk over and over again.
And then Kirk starts yelling Miramani's name and Spock has to break the link.
Look at me. You are not
Kirk.
You are
Captain James T. Kirk.
and you love me.
McCoy's like, well, Spock, what is it? And Spock gets a great line here. He says, his mind. He is an extremely dynamic individual.
He's probably like, that's a mess in there.
Yeah, right?
Talking about his brain. But apparently it worked because Kirk finally remembers who he is.
Cancel the show!
He goes to check on Miramani, and Spock says, Captain, were you inside this woman? Wait, structure. Were you inside this structure?
And Kirk confirms it was loaded with lots of tech, lots of scientific equipment. So Spock says, well, this obelisk is just one huge deflector, and we have to get back inside it immediately.
Spock's translated quite a number of these markings into musical notes, so there's some kind of pattern that opens the obelisk, maybe played on an instrument, maybe just spoken. Kirk's like, Shit, well, when I called in there in the first place, I had just called the Enterprise. So he asked for a communicator, like he's going to retrace his steps. And Spock's like, if you can only remember your exact words, Captain. And Kirk's like, yeah, I don't remember anything, Spock. That's kind of been the running thing this whole episode. But he flips open the StarTAC and says Kirk to Enterprise, and the trapdoor slides open with Miramani still laying on it.
He talks to Scotty and he says if the deflector isn't activated within 20 minutes, he tells him just to get the fuck out of orbit and get the Enterprise out of the danger zone. The landing party is expendable. The Enterprise isn't.
What are the odds that Kirk's voice saying Kirk to Enterprise, chirp, chirp, Kirk to Enterprise, what are the odds that that is the specific tonal requirement of the musical machine that opens this door?
0.00000.
Yeah, incalculably small.
Right.
Yeah.
It's very weird. Again, they're like, we gotta finish this episode.
Yeah.
we gotta come up with something.
Down in the chamber, Spock recognizes a similarity to other deflector panels, but this is far more complicated. But the symbols on the wall here must also contain instructions on how to turn the thing on. And Spock is able to read it, but he has to Spock about it first. He's like, I do have an excellent eye for musical notes, Captain.
This news really changes everything.
And Kirk's like, Spock, just press the fucking button already.
Sure enough, Spock presses the middle button. A bunch of other sections light up. A blue beam of light, which I think they mentioned the tribes people said something about a blue flame.
Mm-hmm.
A blue beam shoots out of the top of the obelisk and pushes the asteroid away.
Kirk comes to check on Miramani in the lodge building, and McCoy says her internal injuries were too bad. She's going to die.
From rocks? Are you fucking telling me that someone throwing some rocks is going to kill someone?
Apparently. I mean, they stoned them to death was the way it was done once upon a time.
Yeah, but we don't know how long that took. I would imagine that took like a long time.
Well, biblically, wasn't it like they buried you up to your neck and then threw rocks at you?
I mean,
Something
that
like
sounds like some cruel shit that was in the Bible. So yeah.
Yeah. He goes to her side and they have a final conversation. She's happy that he's safe and her people too. She knew he would save them and she's proud of her chief husband. She's like, hey, when I get better, everything's going to go back to normal, right? Like we're still married and in love and all that shit. And Kirk's like, I mean, if that's what you want.
No.
Yeah. But he knows she's not going to make it. So he's,
telling her what she wants to hear to comfort her in a way.
Yeah,
it's really sad.
She says that they will live long and happy lives. She'll give him many strong sons, again, because patriarchy, and she'll always love him. And he says, I love you back, and they kiss, and she dies, the end.
Oh my god! They've killed
Miramani.
you bastards!
Yikes.
Boy, I'm sure glad that's over with.
I'm happy the affair is over.
Me too!
A most annoying, emotional episode.
Yeah, but you know, I learned something today.
When dreams become more important than reality, you give up travel, building, creating.
One jealous god, if all this makes a god.
By sparing your helpless enemy, who surely would have destroyed you, you demonstrated the advanced trait of mercy.
Frankly, I was rather dismayed by your use of the term half-breed. You must admit, it is an unsophisticated expression.
We talked about how like a primitive culture, and they see something. The whole reason for the fucking Prime Directive.
Right. Yeah, because they think that you're a god. Yeah.
Yeah, it's to prevent stuff exactly like that from happening, from not leaning on their own power to solve problems. Now they're just, everything was all about the obelisk.
Mm-hmm.
And the preservers are terrible. If that is what they hoped for a civilization that they created, was to have them not think for themselves.
Yeah.
And that's irritating to me.
All right. Well, now then it is time to honor the dead. Pull up your mad bars.
Rest in peace to Miramani.
She's the only one, right?
She is the only one.
What about Kirk and Miramani's unborn child?
Oh shit! Well, I guess
is it a person or not, Allie? Is it a person?
No,
how many weeks? Far along was she? How many?
No. It's not. It's not. It's a massive cell. She was only 2 months pregnant, maybe less than 2 months.
Yeah.
No. So yeah, no.
I got you out of that one. Don't worry.
Just mere money.
It's dead, Jim.
We are assembled here today to pay final respects to our honored dead.
On the planet Emerald, Kirk's second life as Kirk begins. He fell into the obelisk and mashed some buttons, zapped himself, and he didn't remember nothing. And in this paradise land of milk and honey, Kirk met a girl named Miramani. He married the girl and she was with child, but their happiness would only last a short while. The villagers were angry and called Kirk a fraud. He could not make the obelisk work. He was a false god. So they threw rocks at Kirk, but ended up hitting his wife. And this, sadly, ended both her and the baby's life.
Oh,
Rest in peace.
Let's get right to business.
Fine, I'm authorized to pay an equitable price. Federation has invested a great deal of money in our training. They're about due for a small return.
Listen, we pay off percentages. We're entitled to a little service for our money, huh?
Is this the way your citizens do business? Their right of petition?
They pay their percentages and the boss takes care of them.
Is there anything else?
There are a lot of great ways to help support us here on Humanist Trek. One of the free ways to do that is to leave us a review or a rating wherever you happen to listen to the show. Of course, one of the best ways to support us is to throw some Federation credits at us by becoming patrons of the show.
Ching, ching.
We want to thank all of our patrons. We especially want to thank our founding admirals. A special thanks to Russell, Allie, Peter, Sarah, and Sherry. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
All patrons at every level, all the patrons get early access to every episode, special merch, a growing catalog of bonus content like personal logs and reactions to very short Treks episodes. So there's a lot of great reasons to come over and join our Federation. So head on over to patreon.com/humanisttrek and pledge as little as $3 a month. It really does make a big difference, and it means a lot to us. All right, I don't really have a great intro for this, like an intro drop for this segment. So let's just dive right back into it. We are joined again now by Dr. Mohamed Noor, the bio-Trekkie. I think this is a good introduction to some of the specific biological issues in this episode, but let's back up a little bit first. So back in season 2, episode Bread and Circuses, we talked about something they referenced, Hodgkin's law of parallel planet development.
Oh.
And we found this interesting because like in a handful of episodes just before that one, I think maybe the Nazi episode and the 1920s Chicago mob episode and maybe that masturbatory American nationalist episode.
It's called the Omega Glory. I don't know if you remember that.
Oh my gosh, that episode.
They talk about like, oh, how highly unlikely it is for to be in this faraway alien civilization to evolve so closely to Earth and humans. So like, and right at the top of this episode, Spock makes the same claim. The odds would be astronomical.
Yes.
So this is something we know that you've explored. Besides, like, humanoid aliens are cheap to produce in 1966. What's the science?
Well, it's fascinating because it was interesting what Spock chose to say there. Because he talked about like the planetary composition and size and all things like that. I mean, yeah, that's true. Like, obviously, you would never get, Native Americans on Jupiter, right? Or whatever, or something like that. Clearly. But it's interesting. That's just one small piece of the problem. Like, even if you had something that was exactly like Earth, that was formed at the exact time as Earth, what are the odds you would get something that looks just like what happens now? I mean, It's interesting when you think about what is the role of random chance events in evolution in general. And that's not even considering like cultural things, which is like incredibly fine.
Right.
But even just like, would you get some of these even vaguely humanoid? And it's fascinating in that sense, because let's think about it here on our planet. What are some big chance events that had a big impact? Well, one I always like to cite is, of course, 65 million years ago, we had this giant asteroid impact on Earth, which knocked back the dinosaurs.
Right.
Did that happen on this little planet too?
Right.
Right. I mean, that's such a random chance. And that's just one extreme example, but if you look over the 4 billion years of history, there have been a ton of those things. So I don't know you would ever expect. I mean, I agree with the astronomical point. I don't think the piece about the size of the planet is even most of the problem, though. That's just a small bit of it all.
Right. So I guess then the question becomes, how likely is humanoid life, right? Like I'm I'm a believer. I don't believe that aliens have visited us and anal probed us and whatever, but like the fact Allie's big into ancient aliens.
Ancient aliens. Absolutely love that show. I don't take it as truth, but I just love the different theories.
But like to the question of, is there life out there? Yes. Statistically speaking, there's got to be some kind of life, something that we would describe as having the characteristics of life. That may be plant life or insect life or whatever that looks like. But what about humans?
Well, let me take a step back. Or
humanoids, I should say.
Yeah, before we get to the humanoid part, let me take a step back on the comment you made earlier, too, in terms of like plant life or insect life. It's interesting. It's quite likely there would be life on some other world, but it might
bacteria.
Be truly, well, it might be just unrecognizable. It might be something that we just can't even tell. But it fulfills what we think of as life. Because I mean, let's think of it this way: all life on Earth is related. Like, in sense, there was one single origin of life. So everything on Earth here is, carbon-based, water-based. DNA or RNA, nucleic acids as a hereditary material. So I mean, think about it like let's use the word game. Okay. Imagine the only games you'd ever seen were like, say, Settlers of Catan and things that were like related to Settlers of Catan. And then somebody showed you Monopoly. You're like, well, maybe it's a game. Like, what are all these like weird pieces of paper that are on the side? And then somebody shows you, and let's say somebody goes more extreme. Somebody shows you like, solitaire, or somebody shows you, hockey, or something. Right?
Yeah. So it's our perception of what life is that we wouldn't know what to look for because we only have Earth.
Right. We have
what life looks like on Earth.
Exactly. And some of it's semantic because I mean we could just define life as things that look like what we have here. And that's I feel like that's a very narrow definition. But and we could just choose and that's how we're going to define life from now on. But I feel like at some point we're going to start seeing things like, okay, I think we need to include this in the circle of life. And maybe the definitions we use are not wholly encompassed or sufficiently encompassing in that sense. So we'll see. It's going to have to involve something about complexity and probably some sort of reproduction. But yeah, we can come back to that. Yep. In terms of humanoid life, it's interesting how Star Trek has tackled that. I mean, because if you ask most Star Trek fans, and you mentioned Sarah when you started with Next Generation, most people will cite the episode The Chase. They're like, oh, that's what explains all the humanoid life everywhere. The Chase is interesting because the principle from that is that life was seeded in all these different worlds 4 billion years ago. So that sounds reasonable, right? In the sense, okay, maybe they dropped like a first bacteria or something like that.
I always wonder, there's a bunch of episodes in the original series where they use the term seeded. And it's always this all-powerful ancient race that has taken it upon themselves to seed the universe or whatever.
It is vague.
What is that? Yeah, I want to know.
Well,
what does that mean?
The thing that I think about that next gen episode, the story-wise, what was interesting was the like components of DNA that were in all of these different species when put together activates a hollow program or something, and like what?
Which has been intact for 4 billion years,
right? But as a story mechanism, that was kind of neat.
It was cool. Story-wise, it's phenomenal. I'll totally grant that. But the problem with that one is actually the same problem we talked about earlier. It's the role of random chance events. Like, so on Romulus and on Cardassia Prime and on Kronos, did like asteroids knock out the dinosaurs on all those planets too? Did the mitochondria, you mentioned the mitochondria when we were talking beforehand, did the mitochondria still like get swallowed up into a cell like 2 billion years ago? I mean, all those random chance events would have to happen at about the same time to get what looks vaguely like us, around the same time frame. So that's a tough sell. Even though it's fantastic from a story point, it's a tough sell in that sense. So the other episode, and this is now from the original series, is I can't remember the name of the episode. It's the one that has Sargon with the big balls.
Oh yeah,
Sargon. What is the name of that? The Sargon and the Lhasa, and I can't remember the other one.
Yeah, it's the one with Dr. Pulaski.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. I think she was Dr. Ann Mulhall.
Right.
But yeah. So that one, they said that these ancient aliens had gone to different worlds, and essentially they had become they were the ancestors of those different races. So that sounds more reasonable, right? And I think the time frame on that was much shorter. It wasn't 4 billion years ago. It was more like, a couple of 100,000 or maybe something like that. It was much more recent. The problem with that one is, of course, that means that humanoids on Earth are not related to anything else here on Earth. Like we're not related to, other mammals and things like that. That's objectively wrong. Like we know that from all sorts of studies that's objectively wrong. So that doesn't fail. This episode actually works the best.
Really?
On that front, it works the best because what it's basically just saying, we plucked some humanoids from Earth not that long ago, we put them someplace else. Like, yeah, I mean, I can't disprove that.
Yeah.
That's fully reasonable. They would have to have brought like the orange blossoms and honeysuckle and all the other things we saw there in the fish. But if they put all that stuff there,
yeah,
it works.
Yeah, I would imagine that you could terraform a planet using Earth's base organic materials or whatever.
Carbon.
That's a possibility. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, that's fair. So I mean, of all of them, this one actually works the best.
So I'm a podcaster, not a scientist, but I do know that it's not possible. Well, as far as I know, for humans on our planet to breed with, like, say, another species, like a goat or whatever.
Yeah, I see where you're going.
Something about
even before that, like in our evolutionary line, like eventually the change is so drastic that those two can't mate togetger, right?
Yep.
Yeah, but in Paradise Syndrome. Yeah. So Kirk conceives a child with I'm always getting her name. Miramani. And she's a woman from the tribe. And I didn't think anything of it. I didn't blink. But in the Star Trek universe, we've got our well-known character Spock, who is half human, half Vulcan. And as McCoy would say, he's a half-breed because he's racist.
We are not McCoy fans after watching this series. No.
For many reasons.
Yeah.
But Kirk says that a few times too.
Yeah, I know, but he didn't mean it. But so I'm curious about what your thoughts are on humans actually having successful reproduction with another species on a different planet. Like, what conditions would have to be met for that to actually happen, like from a DNA level?
I'm so happy you asked that question because I have a very good answer to this. And actually, again, this episode is the best in that front because let's use the example of this episode. Presumably they were collected, these people who were there were collected in, say, like, I don't know, 1500s. I'm just making up time for it. Would Kirk be able to breed with them? Sure.
Yes.
They're just humans. Right?
Yeah.
So that actually, this idea of just taking humans would work. Now, what's going to depend is how far back you go. So you can actually go fairly far back. Let's say we're talking more 100,000 years ago. So this would be at the time on Earth, you would have seen, say, Neanderthal or something like that. Different species formally. Humans could breed with Neanderthal. We actually know that all of us probably have a little bit, very, very little bit, but a little bit of Neanderthal ancestry. Meaning we have, there at some point in time was an ancient human with an ancient Neanderthal who bred, and then we are one of those long descended offspring. Some humans on Earth also are descendants of another humanoid species called the Denisovans. So if it's that sort of time frame, it actually works pretty well. Now, what's tough is if you start going back like millions and millions of years, like, okay, now too far back because all the physiology is going to be too different. The genetics are too different. That's when things start to fall apart.
Gotcha.
But if you imagine, let's say, for example, I'm going to ignore the whole green blood thing. Throw that out for a minute. If you ignore that and just say, like, could some, say, Homo erectus from Earth have been taken, and then maybe on that particular planet, some mutation arose to give pointy ears and more up pointy eyebrows? Yeah. And is it possible that humans would be reproductively compatible with them? Potentially. And actually, even when the case of Vulcans, it's not smooth because you might remember in Enterprise, they talked a little bit about how like some extra effort needed to happen. It wasn't just they just breed in and have kids. Do you remember there was the whole T'Pol? Sorry, that was it was the Trip and T'Pol thing, but actually I take that back. That was a synthetically produced offspring. It wasn't just not. I think I'm confusing with Klingons. With Klingons, it's not totally smooth.
Gotcha.
There was some extra effort. That was Kalar in Next Generation.
Right.
About that. Yeah.
Klingons are difficult to mate with anyway because the males have two penises.
There's that too. But you imagine maybe Klingons have a common ancestor a little bit further back, whereas Vulcans are a little bit more recent.
Right.
So, I mean, we could retcon this pretty well. Now, the key would be this model. Now, if we go back to, say, the Chase model, it doesn't work at all. Like, okay, we have a common ancestor 4 billion years ago. Like, we're related to grass than we are to Vulcans by that model.
Gotcha.
Like, we don't breed with grass.
Right.
that doesn't fly. This model works pretty well.
Another sort of a follow-up to that. So I saw you on it was a podcast with Robert Picardo and I can't remember the lady's name. She played she was Officer Cromwell or something. So you said something, and I was like, that's interesting. You said species that have the most genetic diversity are ones that are most likely to adapt and persist over time.
Yep.
I'm wondering, like, I think you were talking about the diversity episode episode in Discovery, but I'm wondering, like,
Season 4 finale. Yeah.
Where do humans rank as far as genetic diversity?
Well, it depends on relative to what. I mean, like if you're talking about like relative to bacteria. I mean, diversity is largely, not perfectly, but largely correlated with population size, and then kind of the average stable population size. So, for example, if you have, let's say, you have a population of, I'm trying to think, like, leopard, or what's the one that people always say have really small numbers? Not leopards. It's some other cat. I can't remember what it. We'll just say leopards for the sake of argument.
Okay.
Let's say leopards have a very, very small population size. They're largely inbred, things like that. If you suddenly grow up the leopard population, there's not going to be that much more variation because it's just whatever was there already, right? But we wanted something that has a long-term stable population size. With humans, actually, our population size recently has expanded a ton, but historically it wasn't that big. It was tens of thousands or something like that, or hundreds of thousands for many, many years, and then just recent, maybe not quite that small. Sorry, I think I exaggerated that.
We've had like a growth spurt. Yeah, exactly.
So I mean, we have some, but not a ton. Now, what you tend to see is smaller organisms that, let's say, that historically have been spread everywhere, not ones that are spread by virtue of humans, that historically have been spread everywhere.
Yeah.
They tend to, on average, have larger population sizes and tend to, on average, have more variation.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So before we move out of this episode into some more broad questions, is there anything else honestly, when we sent you the email and we're like, hey, look, come on the show, what do you want to talk about? And you picked this episode, having not watched it yet, Allie and I were both like, the fuck is this episode got to do with biology?
Yeah, I couldn't remember.
I was like, this is the one with the terrible native tropes. Like, this is, but I didn't remember any of the details of it. And then after watching it, we were like, oh yeah, okay,
yeah. Now you see why.
Yeah. So, is there anything we haven't hit on from this episode that you want to make sure
we definitely hit on the main points for this one in particular, for sure. Sorry, I should have clarified in the email about that, but I can imagine that's probably not the most memorable part of the episode.
No, the discovering what the interest was part of, I think, of our experience watching it.
Yeah.
That aha moment when you're like, oh, that's what it is.
It's nice because part of it came right in the very beginning too, so that was helpful.
Yes.
So currently we're finishing up season 3 of the original series, and then we'll move on to like TNG and Voyager, and we're going to review every episode of every Star Trek series. And as I mentioned, we do bash it heavily.
Fair.
And so besides Paradise Syndrome, what other original series episodes stick out to you from a biology standpoint?
Well, we mentioned the Sargon one too, and briefly. One that is interesting is Devil in the Dark, the horror one.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely love that one.
Yeah, and actually, there's a lot of interesting stuff in that. That's just kind of first. Well, I love that you actually see something that's completely not humanoid. Like, okay, there's an alien.
Yeah,
and it's silicon based, which is already pretty cool because you might remember carbon atoms from where they are on the periodic table. Carbon atoms can bind with 4 other atoms. Silicon is one below it, so it can also bind to 4 other atoms. So, if we had to pick something that was not carbon based, that would be a good basis for life. So,
right. I remember, Spock couldn't detect it with his instruments because he wasn't looking for that.
Exactly. It comes back to our conversation earlier. Yeah. Well, what's interesting about that, there was also a passing comment made by McCoy in that episode, which was incredibly insightful. I was actually very surprised. I didn't know how insightful it was when I first saw it because obviously I hadn't been trained yet as a biologist. But he made a comment like silicon-based life is biologically impossible, especially in an oxygen atmosphere. That last part was fascinating. And the reason for that is, so with carbon, so a lot of our basis for life is carbon-based, right? You hear that all the time, but what does that mean? So let's say think it's like a carbohydrate. It's like there's like a string of carbons, and then around it you'll have these like you'll have hydrogens or oxygen or things like that. But you have this chain of carbons, and you get things like that with proteins. You get things like that with fats, with our nucleic acids. That is harder to do with silicon because silicon would prefer to bind to something like oxygen or hydrogen than it would to another silicon. So that point about being in an oxygen atmosphere was actually very insightful. Like, oh, Yeah, like if there was
McCoy
no,
got something right. What?
yeah, no, exactly, he did. He's not always just a racist, annoying person.
I know.
Well, there's a tie-in. We have a listener question that I think ties in really well to this, and this comes from one of our patrons, Lieutenant Commander Anders Hove.
Hello, Anders Hove.
One thing I noticed during the pandemic was how many episodes of Star Trek feature airborne viruses. And then when this is discovered, the only actions are mainly find the cure or quarantine the sick person or people forever. No masking or distancing or even discussed. Like in Babel, DS9, episode 5 of season 1, everyone just comes and goes into the sick ward, talking to and hugging patients. I really think all these virus episodes can't be watched seriously post-COVID to the point where I consider it like a kind of scientific mistake or goof, where you just can't suspend disbelief. So my question is, when you've looked at older episodes of Star Trek, like from decades past, what embarrassing mistakes have you spotted? Things that you just can't explain by the way things work in Trek or by dramatic license that you need to make the stories work? Anything that particularly inspires you, either positively or negatively, from those past mistakes that you noticed from before your time?
Thanks, Anders. That was a great question.
Brilliant question.
Yeah.
So yeah, definitely personal protective equipment, PPEs, are definitely not used nearly enough in Star Trek. That has come up many times. I have a good friend, Dr. Anne-Marie Siegel, who has an MD, and she always talks about it like, what?
Why don't they wear masks or something?
No, exactly. And they'll sometimes have these weird suits on. Like, what is that suit there? Like, that isn't doing anything. Maybe it's just we don't understand what it's doing. Maybe it has some weird virus sucking property or something like that. I don't know. They have really good air filters. I don't know what's happening there.
We've talked about in the original series, half the time they're carrying around these like Ecolab spray bottles with no labels.
Yeah.
Nobody knows what's in it. Nothing's labeled.
Yeah, the Office of Safety and Health, like that, they would have a field day in most of these places. No, but the one thing that tends to get me in just about all sci-fi, and Star Trek's not alone in this thing, is the use of the word mutation. Like, oh my gosh, look, Geordi is mutating, and he just like then becomes this other thing. Like, what? That's not
like
how
all of a
mutations
sudden.
work.
Oh my god! Overnight.
Exactly, because if you think about what's happening, so we have a genetic code, and and that genetic code helps produce what we are. But it doesn't just do it like in a snap, right? It is essentially it's like an instruction manual for as new cells are made. That's going to happen. So I could have every cell in my body like right this second mutate to be like mouse cells. I wouldn't just suddenly boom be a mouse, right? Because like the structures are already there. It would have to be like after all the cells divided and new organs are produced. There would be a much, much, much longer lag on it. And it assumes these things actually still all work well together from the original without just killing the original in the process of going there, which also seems very improbable.
And then you'd have to procreate and have kids in order for it to see that mutation, right? I mean, you're not going to change who you are.
Yeah, potentially. I mean, that may or may not be the case. If let's say, for example, it was something that was to say change hair color, you would just need like say the cells in my follicle to change, and then then like new hair would eventually grow out. But again, it's not going to be in a day. It's going to take like a month or something until you see it. So yeah, that is always a problem. What I like, and we tried to get this into a couple episodes there, is rather than actually changing the DNA, because that's also just really problematic when you change the DNA in some sort of haphazard way. But you're trying to use more epigenetics. So something about like the signals the cells receive have changed, and therefore now the same cell is going to start producing something else right away. And that may be something that's already the case for all those cells. So they essentially are already semi-coordinated in that sense. But even that has its own issues too. But it's still better than just mutations, which like most mutations are just random anyway. Like we have a mutation, it's like, okay, you have no idea what it's going to do. The most likely answer is going to be like cancer. So it's not going to turn you into a Cardassian or something like that.
But it sounds cool, mutation. Yeah. We like to throw around the word.
And then they just do something all of a sudden it's fixed. Like, okay. There's always the transporter, which is the magical device, right? It's like, oh, now it just makes you okay again. Like, what?
Yeah.
Why don't they just do that anytime anybody gets sick? Or like, I'll just, put my new pattern that doesn't have the virus, and boom, I'm good.
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna jump ahead in my list here.
We have a transporter.
We have some transporter questions.
A couple of them.
This one comes from Ensign Ian Davies on our Discord. You're the bio-Trekkie. How are you with particle physics?
Oh, terrible is the answer.
Ian's question is, how do the Heisenberg compensators work?
The classic answer people have said on this. I think people who made it said, "Very well, thank you."
Yes.
I think that's the true answer. Like, yeah, no clue how the Heisenberg compensators work. I will say, I think transporters are death machines. Well, like, I think the person who comes on the other side is not the original person.
That was
my completely different matter.
That was
it's not the same matter. How is that me still? Like, that's not me. I am dead, and just a duplicate of me has been made over there. And that duplicate doesn't know they're a duplicate, but they are a duplicate.
You just split the room.
Yeah.
Could a technology like the transporter ever exist? Is that something we could ever get to? No.
Where
it's because of the Heisenberg uncertainty principle. That's why, like, they're basically knowing exactly where every particle is at an exact moment. It would never work. Yeah,
you just need a compensator. You need something to compensate for that.
Yeah,
it's taking you apart and putting you back together, and it's gotcha.
Yeah, but it's putting you back together with a whole different set of matter. That's the piece that makes me think, like, well, that's not you anymore. Then, like, there's no overlap between the matter that was me and the matter that's over there now. So, like, that's not me. It may have my memories, but it's just because it's a complete duplicate down to like the chemicals that are associated with my brain.
And which movie was it? We saw the terrible mangled transporter. Yeah. Oof.
Yeah. The motion picture. Yeah, that was terrible.
This next question comes from Founding Admiral Sarah Davis on our Patreon. What, in your opinion, and this may be it, what is the best example of authentic biological science in Star Trek, the original series?
In Star Trek, the original series. Well, I mean, I think the example I gave earlier with the Horde, I love that. I thought that was really cool, and it was original. It was clear. It was. They actually, I mean, aside from the fact it looks like a pizza on a shag carpet.
Toxic meatball.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right. It's truly alien elements. Very creative. Obviously, like the specifics are a little bit funny in terms of like, okay, it's silicon based, but what are, I mean, is it essentially something that's like carbohydrates, but with silicon substituting, or silicon atoms substituting for the carbohydrate? There's a lot of questions that are still open there, but I loved it. I thought it was fantastic.
What about in the broader Star Trek universe? Is there, and what's your go-to episode? And you're like, this is where they got it right.
Well, honestly, generally speaking, if you
the one that you did,
basic, no, well,
the stuff that you worked on, right?
I'm skipping those. So that would be fair. Generally speaking, whenever they have basic genetics, like when they talk about a trait being genetically dominant or trait being genetically recessive, or they just talk about just very basic stuff about DNA, it tends to be pretty good. Like you can tell, like some of the past science consultants, like Andre Bormanis, people like that, you can tell they look this stuff up and they try to get it just right. So when it looks at the basic genetics, generally speaking, it tends to be pretty good. And that's, you see that like hints of that in a whole bunch of episodes, especially Voyager, but not exclusively.
So the Omega Glory episode in the original series, so this was where the humans were reduced to crystals because they had contracted a disease on the planet. And McCoy said that it's potassium's 35%, carbon 18%, phosphorus, calcium. That's all that's left of the human body after the water's taken away. So how accurate is this? Like if I'm sitting here and poof, someone took all the water out of me, would I just be white crystals? How accurate is that?
I'm sure the answer is it's not, but I don't know what the right answer would be. But I'm fairly confident it would not be like a white crystal.
It would be dust or something.
Yeah. But I don't know what that would look like. That's a good question. We could tie that into Lower Decks and say, like, what happens if a moopsie gets you?
Oh yeah.
Moopsie.
That's not water, and so that's the bones, but still.
Right. You'd just be a gelatinous blob at that point. And finally, this is also from Ian, I believe. You said your parents were engineers. Ian's other question is, who is your favorite Star Trek engineer?
Who's your favorite Star Trek engineer?
I'm split between like Scotty and Geordi, I think are my go-tos.
I mean, honestly, the two that jumped in my head when you first asked the question were Trip Tucker and B'Elanna Torres. Those ones that jumped in my head first. Yeah. I don't know. I mean, the problem is I don't really know engineering that well. So, I mean, I just think about the character, or worse, I mean, actually worse than thinking about the character. Sometimes now I like, since I go to so many conventions and stuff, I think about the actor and I'm like, oh my God, Connor's fantastic.
Right.
Like, okay, but like, it's not about Connor. It's supposed to be about Trip Tucker.
Right.
Oh, it is though, because
Roxanne Dawson's also been great.
The actor brings so much to the character.
Yeah.
So then what about, and I want to say scientist, but like that could go in a million different directions.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like when you think like
McCoy.
No,
No, not McCoy.
Well, I mean, for original series, it would probably be Spock rather than McCoy. Anyway.
Yeah.
No, for sure.
But it's
Well,
interesting when you think about, like, say,
Sulu was a botanist for a hot minute.
He was. It's interesting to think about, like, Voyager. Like, who's the science officer on Voyager? I mean, people often say Harry Kim, but like his formal title was Ops.
Right.
Yeah.
But they didn't really have a science officer. Like, it's not. I mean, you might think the Vulcan, but like, no, the Vulcan was doing security. Like, he's clearly not that.
It's maybe the medical, the EMH.
The EMH,
or
it's some mix, maybe 7 to an extent.
Yeah.
It was very diffuse. And you know, for something like for Deep Space Nine, it was pretty clearly Dax when it was Jadzia. Less clear when it was Ezri.
Yeah.
It's hard to, and like who is on Next Generation? Is it Data? I guess.
Yeah.
Or is it Crusher
Bev?
more? Yeah. No, it's
Crusher?
hard to it's hard to pinpoint. Yeah. You know, it's a fun one if you think of her. This Tilly's fun. I actually didn't like her in the very first couple of episodes, but by the end, I really liked her a lot.
Yeah.
I love
Tilly grew on me big time. Yeah.
Same. Yeah. Right at first, I was a little bit like, I don't like how insecure she is, but eventually, it became much more charming as opposed to annoying.
Right. Well, and it coded for like her character to be like a lot of people in the Star Trek fandom. And so that representation piece of, like, we've talked about this before, as a trans person, Allie as a Black woman, like seeing ourselves in Star Trek is a huge deal.
Yep. And important.
Yeah.
We belong everywhere, even though we're not the same as everybody else. So,
Who would it be on Strange New Worlds?
Ooh. Well, I mean, Nurse Chapel is pretty impressive on.
Oh, yeah, Spock.
I do love Chapel.
And Spock.
Yeah.
No, this is it. I got my number one medical, M'Benga.
Oh yeah, of course.
He's awesome.
He's the only one who can work on like Vulcan physiology, because McCoy obviously can't.
There's so many times in the original series that McCoy's like, I don't know, and we're like, where the hell is M'Benga? Get that guy up here. He's better. Yeah.
True.
Oh,
Okay, another fun question.
Please.
If you could play or be any alien in the Star Trek universe, which one would you be and why?
Tholian.
Tholian?
Yeah, because again, they're really cool. It's really, really different. It's not just like just another humanoid alien. And what's interesting with them is they can't even survive like in our temperature. And we tend to see all the aliens will like come on the ship and they're just like fine hanging out on the ship.
Yeah,
you know,
walking around, breathing.
Exactly. Yeah, whereas Tholians need to be like way hotter for them. Like the ship is freezing. And that actually makes sense. Like, why should a random alien species have the same thermal tolerance as we do?
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah.
Well, let's wrap this segment up. Are there any like current projects that you're working on that you want to talk about, whether it's Trek or not, and or any upcoming speaking engagements? Talk about your class, your book, any of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, so I am teaching a class in the spring for first-year students. I've taught this before. This is using my book. So the class is just titled Genetics, Evolution, Star Trek. I've taught it before. But I use my book. It's really fun because
book publishers really want like long-ass titles. So yeah.
Well, the book has a much longer title. This is just the transcript entry. It would be that on it. But what I love about that is we essentially cover everything that's covered in the majors. One of the two major intro classes, biology major intro classes, but just all using examples from Star Trek. So it's all through genetics, evolution, and bits like that, and the history of life. So I love it. And last time we did it, it was so much fun. And what I love is the students have to come up with a final project that they come up with themselves. So some of them would make like a rap. Some would create a scene for a good Star Trek episode of science. And they would film it. They would get like all their dorm people to be actors in it.
Oh my gosh.
I love seeing their creativity and their excitement about it. Because again, it's not draw a cell and label all the parts. Like, oh my God, nobody wants to do that. Nobody wants.
I love this. I love it.
Yeah, so that's coming up soon. In terms of about speaking engagements, I will be at Starbase Indy on Thanksgiving weekend. So I'm very excited about it. So it's in Indianapolis. I've been to that convention before. It's a lot of fun. Bonnie Gordon from Prodigy will be there as well.
Nice.
She's the voice of the computer there. And I'm anticipating speaking on the Star Trek cruise again in February if all goes well. So fingers crossed.
I'll be there too.
Yes.
So yeah, definitely. Oh, I'm excited.
Awesome. So finally, before we move on to the final segment, where can folks find and follow you?
Oh, sure. So I'm on all the socials, you name it. So Facebook, Twitter/X, Instagram, Mastodon, Threads, Blue Sky, LinkedIn.
all of them. There's
all
so
the
many.
same as Mohamed Noor. M like Michael, A, F like Frank, N like November, OOR. or on YouTube is Biotrekkie, Biotrekkie. And that's where I have like very short sciencey videos based on Star Trek examples.
Which I love those. I love
I
love the YouTube channel.
Thank you.
I assume you're loitering around here to learn what efficiency rating I plan to give your cadets.
Trainees, to the briefing room. Is that all you gotta say? What about my performance?
Aren't you dead?
I don't believe this was a fair test of my command abilities. There was no way to win.
There's no correct resolution. It's a test of character.
Now, what is that supposed to mean?
I am understandably curious.
May I ask you a question?
Who's been holding up the damn elevator?
All right, it's time to bring back our own Academy instructor, Becca, along with our special guest, Dr. Mohamed Noor, for the exciting answer to this week's Starfleet Academy Cadet Challenge. Remind us the question again for the Paradise Syndrome.
The lake featured in this episode is a Franklin Reservoir above Los Angeles. It has been featured in hundreds of westerns and police shows, but was most famous for what?
Okay, now we split the room. We did the Blue Lagoon, the Parent Trap, and I think Robin Hood Men in Tights.
No,
just like
not even close.
Spaghetti at the wall, not even close.
No.
Incorrect.
It was filmed as the fishing hole in the opening credits for the Andy Griffith Show.
God damn it, I should have known that.
We should know that.
I was really afraid you were going to know that, so I'm kind of happy I went with that one.
We have joked this entire series about how the Star Trek universe takes place in Mayberry. Yeah. Shit.
It went through us off as it was in color. If it was in black and white, we would have got it.
Yeah.
That's why it wasn't in color. It wasn't in color.
All right, well, before we move on to next week's question, let's once again give our thanks to Dr. Noor. You're a pleasure to talk to. Come back, please. Come back anytime.
This was amazing.
I'd be honored. It was a blast. I totally enjoyed chatting with y'all. Great questions, too, both from y'all and from the Patreons.
Thank you so much. Next week, we'll be reviewing Star Trek, the original series, Season 3, Episode 4, And the Children Shall Lead. This is another Children of the Corn episode, right?
Oh, creepy.
I don't remember anything about it, though. Do you? All right, what is our question for And the Children Shall Lead?
I am very sorry to do this twice in a row.
Oh, God damn it. Mayberry.
No. But you'll know when you know. What Old Testament book of the Bible contains a verse reminiscent of the title of this episode? Bonus points for chapter and verse.
Oh, fuck that. I don't know.
Oh, I don't know. There's no fucking way. I have no clue.
Okay.
And the child shall lead them?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Did I get those in the right? I have no idea. Okay.
No, those were in the right order, but it wasn't any of those.
Were they really in the right order?
Genesis, Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, yeah.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Okay, so it's none of those. Jebediah. It's new. Is it New Testament?
It's Old Testament.
Old Testament. Fuck.
But it's one of those Old Testament books that I didn't realize was an Old Testament book until I actually researched this question to make sure.
Oh, so you wouldn't have gotten it right either.
I wouldn't have gotten
Psalms.
it. No.
I mean, you're just going to tell me no. I'm just going to keep guessing.
I don't know why I did that. Oh, my God.
Oh, God.
Well, we know we don't. It's none of those. So let's just pick something else.
I'm going to leave the room. You figure it out. Write it down. I'll come back.
Matthew 6:66. I don't know.
Wow.
Okay, I'm going to go with Proverbs.
Matthew 6:66. I'm sticking with that. That's
New Testament. That's New Testament, yeah.
I don't fucking know. Different. It's not a book I go by.
No, me neither. But as a former Christian, I did a lot of Bible study. Lock it in.
Oh, my God.
We've locked in our answers. If you want to play along, no cheating, no Googling. Set a course for your nearest social media app and post your answer with this episode. Use the hashtag Starfleet Challenge and we'll pick out our favorite to give a highly coveted promotion to. Next time on Humanist Trek, Star Trek, the original series, Season 3, Episode 4, And the Children Shall Lead.
Live long and prosper.
Kapla.
Humanist Trek is available wherever you replicate your podcasts. Follow us on all the social medias at Humanist Trek. Become a patron at patreon.com/humanisttrek. Open hailing frequencies to podcast@humanisttrek.com and visit our website, humanisttrek.com. Humanist Trek is a production of Sarah Austin Media.